Now let's talk about Boolean groups. Yeah, also known as Boolean operations or Boolean operators or Boolean function. What is that? How does it work, and actually why do we need them? Well, we need Boolean groups when we need to create illustrations, icons, some graphic design elements, and we also use them in UI. Basically everywhere where you work with shapes and you want to combine them, divide them, extract one shape from another one, subtract one shape from another one, or unite them into one group, this is where we use this function. This is where we use these operators. How does it work and what is that? First of all, before we jump into creation, I want to show you a couple of examples where you can use them. When you need to create icons and enhance the icons that you already created before, for example, like this icon, YouTube icon, profile, download, filter, just any icon that you can think about, usually we will use for that rather pen tool, some shapes tools, and Boolean operators. Yep, I'll show you in the graphic design and web design and mobile UI design modules how exactly to create particular elements for your designs. In this lesson, I'll show you how these operators, how these Boolean groups actually work. And later in the next modules, you will understand how to work with them to create a specific group of icons or illustrations for your designs. You can also use Boolean groups to create floor plans, for example, or icons for your entire mobile application that people will see when they open their home screen on their phones. They will see the icon that you created, and Boolean groups will help you with that. Also, you can use them to create some additional stuff like top notch, for example, for iOS apps, or maybe rounded corners. So instead of rounding corners themselves, maybe you'll create a UI element that will allow people to have the feeling of rounded corners. It's specifically useful when you're using, for example, when you're working with a rectangle shaped screen. Let's imagine that it's an infotainment system in a car or just anywhere else that doesn't have physical rounded corners. This is where you can create them using Boolean operators. And you can create, of course, illustrations and images or graphic design elements for your designs using Boolean operators. As you can see here, this is an illustration and probably it seems complex to you, but when I select it, you will see that inside of this illustration, there are only 3 elements. Only 3 elements, as you can see. Waves, card, and card bottom. That's it. Because we use Boolean operators, they allow us to reduce the number of layers in our file, and they allow us to work and create really incredible things. Let's create some of them so you understand how it works and what it consists of and where to find actually them. To do that, we will be working with shapes. As you remember, to create a rectangle, we'll just press R and create a rectangle. Then you can make rounded corners for this rectangle. Then we'll create another one that will be a little bit wider. We'll make rounded corners, but in this case, all of them. In addition to that, we will duplicate it again. And if you take a look at absolutely any design, any complex design that you will find on the internet, you will realize that all the complex shapes were created from really simple ones. As you can see right now, I'm creating an icon, and for this icon, I just use a rectangle. Nothing else, just one rectangle, and then I duplicate it multiple times, and this is exactly what you see. Then I'll do this, go here, rotate it, make it a little bit smaller. Put it here a little bit below, and that's it. So what do I have now? I created a bell icon. I can use this icon, for example, in my UI design to show how to switch on or off notifications, for example, or just for any other purposes. But when I select this group, I see that it consists of 4 different layers. And of course, I could group them, Command G, and I can group them into one icon. I see bell, just icon bell, or notification. And then I'll have all these 4 elements inside of this group. The only problem with that if something will happen, the group will be destroyed. Or maybe I'll start working with the group and this what can happen. At the same time, the group itself is just combines all these elements into like one box, but it's actually not one element. How to make it as one element? In Figma, in many other tools as well, like Sketch, Illustrator, you can find Boolean operators as well. When we select all these 4 layers, here at the top, once you selected more than one layer, you will see this icon, and when you hover on the drop-down arrow, you will see Boolean groups. And when we click on these Boolean groups arrow, you will see 5 different options. First 4 options show you union selection, subtract selection, intersect selection, exclude selection, and the final one is flatten selection. How does it work? Well, let's take a look. We created all these shapes. So now we can press union selection, and as you can see, it's just one shape now. While I can go inside and make any changes inside of here, for Figma it's just one layer that has only one, like all these 4 elements inside, but it's just one element. And now you can call this element I see bell or notification. In the future, if you want to, you can rotate it by, let's imagine 15 degrees, and now it looks exactly like an icon, and you can also change the color of it. So that's the icon that you just created. And as you can see, just one element here. I see notifications. Perfect. Then you'll add it into a group. Later we'll create, in the next modules, we'll create like the set of icons so you know how to work with them. But hey, just look. This is so cool. One element, and you still have the option to change their position, to change their size, to change everything with those elements, but they will be perceived as one layer, and everything that you see in the parameters layer, in the parameters right sidebar, you will see it as a one layer. And now you can apply the same parameters that you would apply, for example, if you would work with a separate shape itself. Done. You just created an amazing icon using Boolean operator. This is exactly where you select more than one shape. Let me show you on a simple example. We have 2 shapes. We select them. When we select only one, we don't have the option of Boolean operators, because for Boolean groups you need to have at least 2 elements, because you are creating with Boolean groups, you're creating a relationship between these 2 elements. And when we select 2 of them, then we see this additional option, and then we can do what we want here. And union selection, you already realized that it unites the elements that we selected into one group. If you select, let's imagine, these 2 elements and click subtract selection, then the layer that was on top of the second layer will be subtracted, will subtract some part of the shape that is below in the layers. So let's take a look how it works in the layers. So we have rectangle, and above the rectangle in the layers panel, we see an ellipse, and when we select both of them and click subtract selection, the circle, the ellipse, will subtract the part from the rectangle. And later I can go inside of this group and I change, for example, the size of my ellipse. I can change the size of my group. Let's imagine 100 by 100, and for ellipse it will be also 100, 100. And now this part is outside. As you can see, the background is gray, and this is the shape that I have. And if I take, for example, ellipse again and change the size to 200, 200, and put it right here, so now I have kind of a corner. And where can I use this corner? Well, let's imagine that I have one corner and that I have another one. And in between, let's create another rectangle like this. And let's change the radius of two corners that are below here to, let's imagine, something like 100 as well. And for this one, for the top bottom left, 100. Change the size, the color to 111. Select the corner on one side, select the corner on another side, connect them. Change a little bit the size of our rectangle so we can connect these two groups together. Select them, go and click Union Selection. Congratulations, you just created a top notch that goes on iPhone, that goes at the top of the screen. This is where you need that to know how to work with these Boolean operators. And later, now when we created it, it's just one layer now. I can change the color of it. I can do everything that I wanted to create. So now it's not a simple shape as it was before. Now it's a complex shape that was built out of simple ones, the most basic ones. And now I want to show you, so we have this layer, but because it has inside some other elements, when I change the size of it, as you can see, it changes the size separately for each of the element inside of this group. But what if you don't want it to be this way? What if you want it to be the entire fully combined complex shape? That's exactly where you need the option 5, flatten selection. When you press flatten selection or Command E or Control E, now you don't have the option to change anything inside of this group, of the Boolean group, because now it's just one shape. And now when I change the size of it, it will work as it's just one shape. And that's exactly what you need when you're creating the final set of your icons. Once you created the icons and you are happy with them, or you created your illustrations, you're happy with them, this is exactly where you can flatten selection, create as one shape, and that's it. This is how you work with Boolean groups. Now let's take a look on two other options there, so you will understand how to work with it. And later in the next modules, we will use, from time to time, we will use the Boolean groups to create icons, illustrations, some UI elements, and graphic design elements. So how intersect selection works. We already discussed union selection, it just unites. Subtract selection, it subtracts the top shape from the bottom one. And intersect selection, when I select that, Figma shows you here this icon that it will remove everything from the shape, but the element where two shapes intersect with each other. I click on that, and this is what I have. And you might be thinking, yeah, but where can I use that? Well, again, when you start creating something like complex shapes, you don't need to draw them using pen tool or find other ways how to work with just points. You can think, what shapes do I need to combine together so I can subtract, intersect, or unite shapes to achieve the effect that I want to achieve. And then you will see that, for example, to create this icon like this, you just need one rectangle. Let's take a look inside. You will need the rectangle for the cap, additional circle here, or you can use rectangle if you want to. Additional rectangle for the main part here. Then it builds you this shape, the entire shape outside. Then in addition to that, you create 3 lines, and then you subtract 3 lines from the main shape, and this is how you create the trash icon. And then you can press flatten selection, or you select it in Command E, and now it's not a group, it's a full shape. And then I add it to our frame. I add additional buttons, and of course this is not an actual size. For the actual size we will use 24 by 24 points, and the icon inside will be even smaller. We will discuss it in the mobile apps module, but you already have the group, the frame. Now we will call this frame IC trash. You export it as SVG file and send it to developers, and they will be happy to add it to the application that you designed before with the icon that you created using the Boolean groups. So now you know one additional parameter, which is intersect, and let's work with the final one. The results usually will be much more interesting when you are using already a little bit more complex shapes. For example, let's take star here and rectangle here. Let's select both of them and click exclude selection. And now you will see that the intersection of these 2 shapes will be excluded from the group, and everything else stay here. And if now I press Command E to flatten selection, and I go to the point mode when the element is selected and press return, I'll see all the dots here. And this is how it works. So maybe I'll decide to move these dots here, but this will be on a completely different part. And let's imagine that somehow you decided to create this icon or this logo for a company. And instead of creating it using pen tool or just any other way, you create it using Boolean operators, and then you press name of the company will be here on this line. Congratulations, you just created a logo. Yeah, maybe not the best one, but for some company it will be actually a really good one. And we created this logo using Boolean operators. So when you need to create icons, illustrations, UI elements, graphic design elements, including this logo, keep in mind that you have the option to create and use Boolean operators from this panel when you select more than one element. Boolean operators work with different shapes, not only shapes, but also if you have a text and you put rectangle below it, for example, now exclude selection, and this is what you have. It will work similar to mask. We will talk about masks a little bit later, but this is how you can achieve this effect without using masks at all. And then you can even change the text. One more Figma Pro secret to your toolbox: how to create masks without masks. When you need to create something like this, and as you can see, it's not a mask, but we can create. Command E and boom, now just a full SVG vector format file that you can use in your work. Yes, you can't change the text anymore, so that's why my recommendation every single time when you create them, when you flatten, make this function flatten selection, keep it in mind that you will not be able to make changes inside. So my recommendation is to duplicate the file all the time, flatten selection, so done, amazing, and then maybe like, oh, no, I wanted a different thing. I wanted to type name and put it this way here and make it a little bit bigger than typeface itself, and also to make auto height. Done. And now I wanted to put a little bit below here. So yeah, I want to see these things here. This is what I want. Now I duplicate it, Command E, and this is what I'll send to client or add to my brand guidelines, brand book that I'm creating for the client using the Boolean operators when we have at least two shapes selected. Of course, when we see something like this, when two elements are really far from each other, we can still work with them. How does it work? Let me show you. Let's imagine that you created one rectangle, you created another rectangle, and then you pressed subtract selection, and boom, nothing has changed. You just see one shape. How does it work? Well, you just go here and you take this shape, and when you hover it on the shape that you created before, now they work together, because Boolean operators always work as and or. I don't want to dive into programming part of it. It's a mathematical function that subtract, add, or exclude one shape from another one. Now you know how to work with them, so play with them, create different complex shapes. In the future modules, in the next modules, we will start using it a little bit more when we'll start creating illustrations and icons, but you already can start playing with them. And I'll see you in the next lesson. We'll be talking about pen tool, and after that we will dive into some extra stuff, and we are really close already to the final lessons, the main fundamentals of the Figma, so we can go to the next modules. See you in the next lesson.